Hi, everyone. My name is Rebecca Soffer, and I'm delighted that you're here for our February Light After Loss episode with 1-800-Flowers. I run Modern Loss, which is a global community and publication solely focused on pulling each other through the hard times that come with loss and grieving across the long arc. We are very much aware that things in life are not black and white, but rather big shades of gray, very, very varied shades of gray and many hues. And the team at 1-800-Flowers understands that as well as the rest of us do. And that's why I've really, really loved working with them over the last several years on this project, because they get that, when you're sending a floral bouquet, it's not necessarily just to purely celebrate something. It can be in memory of someone, in support of someone going through something really hard. And the realm of things that are really hard in life is enormous. It's not just death. It can be friendship loss. It can be divorce. It can be really hard things, career disappointments. And they understand all of that, which is why this series has been very meaningful to me to be a part of. Every month, we talk about a different theme, and I'm in conversation with a different expert. And today, I'm especially delighted because I think this theme is something that is not talked about enough in the broad light of day. We're going to be talking about caregiving. And it is so much more rich and nuanced than that word might suggest. And we're going to be talking with a leading expert with a national grief organization on it. But I encourage you, before we dive in, to please, if you're watching this, please feel free to comment, ask questions throughout our conversation, because both of us are going to be looking at the questions in the comments later a few times and addressing them. So please, feel free to share your own experiences, your own struggles, because you actually never know who you're going to connect with in the comments section. That is one of the bright spots of the internet, that it does allow us very low touch ways to form community during hard times. So please take advantage of that. All right, without further ado, I want to talk about today's theme. So let's talk about caregiving. I think that when you think about someone who is dying, someone who is ill, someone who is going through something very hard, you normally think about that person and how hard it must be for that person. But I don't think that we also automatically think about the fact that there's a community of people directly affected by what this person is going through. And one or several of those people are probably caregivers. And we don't talk a lot about caregiving and the burden that's placed on them and the honor that is placed on them and the burnout that can come from it and the support that caregivers desperately need doing what they do every day. But we have to, because caregiving can come in many forms, right? They can be neighbors, parents, children, partners, friends. They can be complete strangers who help us. They can be people who do it for legal tender. They could be people who do it just because they're related to us or because they love us, because they're part of our community. It's really anybody who gives of themselves to help those in need, right? There are approximately 43 million caregivers in the United States today. And caregivers, again, they don't just have to be someone who is caring for someone who has a terminal illness. It's anybody who is really tasked with the day-to-day needs and well-being of another person. More than 1 in 5 Americans are caregivers. And some of those numbers went up very, very sharply during the COVID pandemic because a lot of people became caregivers during that time, or that time. It's still that time, by the way. It's still that time. A lot of families took loved ones out of long-term care because of the virulent nature of this illness. Adult day centers closed. The paid caregiving workforce went down because they also had to do their own caregiving. A lot were burned out by, caregiving themselves professionally, by greater risk of infection, by poor work conditions. And so the paid caregiving workforce went down by as much as 12% in certain areas of the country. And so caregiving from community and family really went up. And that's a lot. That's a lot of caregiving during a time when a lot of those caregivers also were working full time, were taking care of small children, were maybe Zoom teachers on top of their jobs. There's a lot of caregiving going on right now. And so today I'm really thrilled to be in conversation with Rebecca Hobbs-Lawrence. She is the head of the Pathways program at the Dougy Center for Grieving Children and Families. And the Pathways program, which the Dougy Center is an organization that I have an incredible amount of respect for. I have been referring people to them for years and years and years. The Pathways program consists of four peer support groups when a family member is living with an advanced serious illness. She's also a grief services coordinator there. And so to say that Rebecca knows about caregiving and supporting caregivers is no small thing. It's kind of the understatement of the century, I would say. So Rebecca, first of all, thank you so much for being here today with me to talk about this.
Oh, thank you, Rebecca, for inviting me. This is really an amazing offering you're giving our communities.
Thanks so much. It is, again, like I said earlier, when you think about somebody who has a terminal illness or somebody who is struggling and really can't care for themselves or needs extra help, I don't think our minds automatically go to the fact that, oh, also someone is providing for those needs. We think about how hard it must be to be that person, right? But tell me, let's first start with like literally the umbrella question. Who is a caregiver, right? Who is a caregiver?
Right. Well, you touched on that. It's anybody offering their help, whether it's for caring directly to that person who might be ill, has a diagnosis of something. Maybe it's caregiving the children in the family while that person attends to them. Maybe it's the people who are doing their dishes and their laundry who are helping care for that household, that family household. Like you said, it may be direct family members, it may be extended family, friends, sometimes like people in a school community that you don't even know until something's happening. And then there's also the paid caregivers for certain families. So it's like anybody and everybody, right? They wear so many different hats.
So many, right? That's the thing.
Many.
It's like there are very few people left in this world who are just, I am simply a paid caregiver or I am doing one role. We are in a time in the world where we are wearing many, many, many hats. And so the burnout can be very real. And I'm going to get to that with you because we really do have to talk about the urgency of caregiver self-care and community care because, 3 years into COVID, a lot of us are kind of drawing from nearly empty wells. Tell me a little bit, like culturally, a lot of this audience is in the United States, where we very much do have this mentality of pull yourself up by your bootstraps, just figure it out. How is the caregiving culture different in the United States as compared to, say, other countries? And I've done a lot of research on this throughout my time working with the grief community.
Right. Yeah, you're right. Like in many of the countries of Europe, where just health care in general is vastly different than the United States, that their idea of supporting families and individuals in those times of need are far greater. They have paid access to caregiving, which translates to equal access, right? When money is no longer the issue, and you don't think about like, can I afford it or not afford it? Then you have access to quality care to help you. In the United States, it is vastly different. There is definitely do you have the money to pay for caregiving, whether it's in the home or needing to put somebody in assisted living, something like that. And then or do I need to provide it myself, which then has a huge ramification then too on their financial income and stability. So I would say, not to judge maybe, but we are a little behind in the United States around what quality healthcare looks like around caregiving and access to services during those times of need.
Yeah, and I don't even think that's an objective or a subjective statement. I think it's an
Right.
objective statement. There are countries in Europe and like the Netherlands, Germany, Finland, even Taiwan. They have compulsory, publicly funded, long-term care insurance that helps cover the cost of paid caregivers, including home caregivers, which is really wonderful because you might have a family member who does not want to or might not need to be in a
Right.
hospital setting. They might be mentally and emotionally better off at home surrounded by loved ones. But, here in the US, if you can't pay for that, then that's not a possibility, right?
Right.
They cover everything from, cleaning, preparing meals, and doing laundry. Or in some countries, you can even borrow against future wages to cover for caregiving. And so, I say all this because I really don't think we talk about it enough in this country, the enormous burden that is placed on caregivers in the United States, right?
Yeah. And
Because there
Rebecca,
are secondary impacts of
they're
caregiving
right.
here.
No, exactly. And I don't think people actually in the United States understand too, like long-term care insurance here. One, you have to really think forward enough to be like, am I possibly going to need this? And do it in a timely manner where you're able to get it and pay into it, where they'll actually be able to support you later on. But it's also not for in-home caregiving. Long-term care insurance is specifically for assisted living or more. So I think sometimes people think something might be there for them when it's really not.
Yeah. So what are some of the ways that caregiving, and I say like not paid caregiving, but when we are a caregiver of ourselves
Right.
or a family member, a loved one, or a friend, what are some of the ways in which real intense caregiving can throw off the balance of somebody's life?
Well, I think one is that financial aspect we were just kind of talking about, right? Like being able to I know families who work extra jobs to be able to pay for caregivers to come in because they need that social outlet that a job offers, right? They don't want to give that up. And so what does that mean? They have to make more to be able to pay for it. And then there are families who are actually making sacrifices, huge sacrifices, so that they are staying home and doing the majority of the caregiving themselves, but with less income. Then that means, what are we not going to have? And sometimes those sacrifices are really big, and those including, I would say, like retirement plans. A lot of people burn out their retirement in caregiving expenses.
Wow.
And I don't think a lot of people know about that happening too. You think you have that 401k there and those access to extra money. Maybe you've been saving since you were, much younger working, but that goes very, very quickly with the expenses of caregiving.
And again, to be clear, and I would love to know, all of you who are watching this, like, please share your experiences with this. Again, like, to be clear, caregiving is not just for people who have terminal illness, who we know that their lives are going to end from a certain specific thing. It can be many different things. There are many different reasons why we might need to caregive. We might need to take time off to care for a baby. We might have a certain period of time where someone in our family is not doing so well, mental health wise, and because of that, and that stuff can happen very suddenly. And because of that, like you say, Rebecca, like a lot of us give up potential future earnings, give up our retirement funds, give up what social time, social connections,
yes, time with friends, your emotional, your physical health. Like there's a lot of sacrifices giving up.
There's a lot of sacrifice involved with caregiving. I'd like to talk about a little bit about what caregivers feel that maybe they feel they can't talk about in public, because we're going to go there, because this is something that we have to talk about. I am like kind of known for, just like kind of
diving in,
plowing through the taboos, not because it's sensationalistic, but because it's ridiculous that these things are stigmatized when
Right.
so many millions of people around the world are dealing with the same thing. They feel so isolated. They feel like they're the only ones who are feeling that feeling or struggling with that thing, but they're
Right.
not. And if we could only talk about it in like more
Yes.
open conversation, we could form community, we could support each other. Maybe we could enact legislation that supports us better. So,
Yes.
tell me a little bit about some of the feelings that caregivers do struggle with, because caregiver burnout is a term that has been thrown around a lot lately.
It's been thrown around and it's real. It is very real. And I'd say the first one we just need to name it is guilt, too. Just like people are feeling guilty, caregivers are feeling guilt because sometimes they're doing jobs that they don't necessarily want to do. They are having to give up, like you said, all of those different pieces of their selves to be able to caregive somebody, whether it's temporary or long term. And they feel a lot of guilt. They feel blame. They blame, just the family dynamics of blaming siblings or other people for not stepping up and taking as much part in the caregiving as maybe they would hope or expected. um, I would say even things like relief. I mean, that sounds weird, but like when somebody can step in and they step away, that sense
Mm-hmm.
of relief. Am I supposed to feel relief when my mom has to go to the hospital for 3 days?
Mm,
And
that's
that's
interesting.
a little 3-day vacation for me while she's in there. Those are strong feelings to have for somebody, especially in isolation and not being
Yeah.
able to share those with people.
Right. And they feel like, oh, I'm a terrible person because I clearly don't want
Right?
mom to be in the hospital for 3 days because she took a turn, and get this treatment and then come back. But I'm also relieved because I can finally stare at the wall for a minute or have a coffee with a friend or take a shower. Then you think you're a bad person, but you're not. You're just
Not.
literally human.
You're
You're not a
human. You're
cyborg.
right. You're overwhelmed. You're overworking. The hypervigilance that goes with caregiving so often
Hmm.
is just, it really is a recipe for burnout. And so those feelings that come with it, or even when someone is stepping into care, like you say, okay, I would love your help. Can you sit with my mom, sit with my husband, whoever it is, for a little while? Can you watch them? I'm going to go out. But then they're out with their friends. They're talking over coffee, and then they feel guilt that they're still not home. I mean, it's hard to relax and actually enjoy yourself and be able to say, I'm away from that. They're fine. And feel like this is a legitimate sense of happiness and joy I'm feeling in the moment, and
Yeah.
rest and relaxation. They feel guilty that they're still not there. I mean, that's how wrapped up people are into their caregiving, so
So
often.
So, for all of you watching this, we are going to be talking about things that you can do to get help and support. This
Yes.
isn't just about, validating the very hard things that you're going through, but I think it really is important to talk about these details because caregiving is really like an innocuous term. It's like self-care, hydrate. Like, what does that even mean?
What does that mean?
Caregiving, it really is worth really unpacking that word, the details that go into the roles, the details that go into the support that is lacking with regard
Yes.
to those roles, and some of the emotional and financial impacts that can come out of either choosing to or having that role foisted upon you. So before we go into the actual support section, my last question for you, and again, like, really want to hear from all of you watching what your own experiences were, and if you have any questions for Rebecca. You just said something interesting, which is like, that's how strongly the caregivers are wrapped up in their own identity of caregiving.
Yeah.
What are some of the major feelings and identity issues that long-term caregivers can experience when the person that they're caring for dies? Because I
Mm,
do believe I have heard many, many stories from Modern Loss community
yes.
members about people who are really struggling with that.
Right. And you see that, I think, the most in caregivers who have had that extended period of caregiving. Maybe it's a parent with Alzheimer's or a child with a long-term disease or illness. So those long extended terms, not the short-term disability kind of pieces, right? And And I think those feelings that come up in their role has become the caregiver. That's who they see themselves as. They see themselves as someone who is watching, protector, nurturer, being able to keep someone safe, both emotionally and physically. Their whole identity is wrapped up into that because it ends up being a day and night, 24/7 kind of job.
Right. And in the wake of doing this long term, so many other aspects of identity fall away.
Right. They fall away, whether it was a career somewhere or even parenting. I have met parents who have children still at home, but their primary identity has become the caregiver for another person and not actually parenting at that time. And I've heard them say things like, I don't even know how to parent anymore. My person, has died and I don't know how to parent. Because that is actually taken, not all the time, obviously, but kind of a second seat to that. And then I think also the grief can be intense in a way that people are not expecting. When there is that long-term caregiving, there's a part of you that's always anticipating and wondering, when is it going to happen? And I'm going to be ready for it because I've been saying all of these kind of goodbyes along the way. There's like sometimes months, years of goodbyes in different ways. And when the person dies, there is this sense of like, not only who am I, but wow, I have all of this grief inside of me that I was not expecting. And I thought I had already done a lot of that. And so then that complicates things for them also, in a way that they weren't anticipating. So there's that extra layer of grief on top of like really the question of who am I now? If I'm not doing this, who am I?
So now that we've established very clearly the variety of things that caregivers experience, I say things, I mean emotions, financial burdens, trade-offs, etc., and probably even gifts, which, absolutely, like I said, everything is a mixed bag. I'm sure that there is something beautiful that comes out of, such intense time with somebody. It's in some ways an honor, but it's not that person deserves for that to be their only role. It's an enormous task to be a caregiver. So what are some ways in which caregivers can support themselves on a daily basis, not just talking like weekly basis, but daily basis, and also, seek out support from others? Because we said in this country, we're not doing a great job, at the structural level. So a lot of it is about grassroots support, is about looking for organizations that do offer support, communities. Tell me some ideas. I mean, you are the expert at this at the Dougy Center.
In the caregiving group that I do right now, even one of the things we just talked about, you said about that daily piece. I think it's really important to start small, especially if you haven't been doing it, right? Like a lot of people might be hearing this being like, oh, like I haven't done this before. And where do I even start? And I say, start small in little increments that you can do and give yourself permission to both have that moment. And if you can't do that moment, the grace to be like, okay, that didn't work out, try again, instead of giving that. But those moments of just like, I give myself, I'm a caregiver for my mom with Alzheimer's. I give myself timeouts, my own timeouts. Like, I'm going to go take a 5-minute timeout because caregiving is hard. It's emotionally exhausting. Sometimes we don't feel like we are thinking with a clear mind all the time. And so being able to say, I just need 5 minutes, and can everybody just take care of the phone or whatever else? I think those 5 minutes are really important. Deep breathing is really important. Get that oxygen back in your body. I think you're on the go all the time. Caregivers often, do a lot of shallow breathing. So something as simple as just really deep breaths, making sure you're getting enough hydration. We don't sit and drink enough water or teas, whatever. It sounds so weird, like be like, just have a cup of hot tea. It sounds kind of flippant in that way, like not serious, but that hydration is really important. And in getting some good foods into you too. Those are the just simple, quick daily steps. And
Right. Like these are
right?
literally the most basic of the basics that you should be
Basic.
doing for yourself.
Right. And
Right.
the
Which
fact that we
we
even
still don't even do sometimes. I
right.
mean, how
And the
many
fact that
times?
we need to talk about it sometimes, I'm like, people don't eat and drink, but it's true. They skip
Yeah.
meals. And
Yeah.
what they do, they snack on little quick snack foods because it's just convenient.
Yeah.
And so really being able to say, I matter. Like, I'm not going to be a good caregiver if I can't take care of myself.
Right. What
You know,
about social connection, emotional support? How can caregivers, you know,
reach
kind
out
of
for people. Yeah.
reach out to people? Because it is like, it's
Yeah.
hard to ask for help. It's really hard. It's embarrassing sometimes. We want to feel like we can handle it all.
We're a
I'm
culture
somebody
of
who
that
likes to,
too. Like, we are totally a culture
forget
of
that in
that.
the culture. That whole like, I don't know how she does it. Well, she probably doesn't know how she does it either, right? I
No.
mean, you're just all hanging on by a thread. So how can we pull each other in,
Right.
and it's not fair, by the way, that a caregiver should feel like a yet another task for them is to ask for support, but it kind of is the way that we've set it up here. So what are some ways in which we
Right.
can do that?
I would say, like, again, make sure that we give ourselves the grace to ask for help and do it. But then ask for things that you really would be really helpful. I need somebody to go pick up my kids from school. I need
Mm-hmm.
somebody to go pick up some groceries for me. Here is a list. I need somebody to fold my laundry because it's sitting in a basket. I
Mm-hmm.
think the more specific you can be with people, the quicker you will get that help. Because I think there's a lot of times a conversation that happens of like, I would like some help. Somebody says, okay, well, what do you need? And they're like, well, I don't
Right.
really know. Well,
Yeah.
let me know when you think of something. I'm here for you. And then the
Right.
conversation ends, right? So I think the more specific people can be asking for help. And if you are one of those people who support a caregiver, they are your friend, they are your family, and you're listening to this, instead of just saying, I'm here for you, let me know what you need. Again, that big, vague, say things like, I can pick up the kids from school. Would you like them to come over and play with my kids today? Do you need dinner tonight? Do you need groceries picked up? I can go put gas in your car. Would you like that? Or, like very, very concrete suggestions, even at things like, I'm a light sleeper. If you need a call at 2 a.m., if you need someone to talk to, my phone's right next to me and I'm happy to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Even those hard ones where you think like, you know, I could never ask somebody to be available to me in the middle of the night. But if you're that person that is open to that, like say you are,
Right. Right.
this,
Everyone has an aspect of their lifestyle or their personality
right,
that can help somebody else.
right,
Everybody. We don't have to
definitely.
all be able to offer the same things. We just have to think about what it is that we're good at offering. And if that aspect is like, I'm a crappy sleeper. Oh, guess what? I can offer like calling me at 2 a.m. because I'm going to be awake
I'm
anyway,
going to be
probably.
awake, right? And
Yeah.
we all kind of know our sense, like we're either a doer, we're a listener, like what are our skills, like you said, and to identify in our friends, what are their skills?
Yeah.
When my dad had cancer before he died, like my family knew very clearly who the different people, we knew who were those to go talk to and just vent. And we also knew who were the people who would get us to school if my mom couldn't, like it was important for all of us to know who could offer what help and then ask
Right.
specifically.
So final part of that question for you before we wrap up is, okay, we've talked about, community support, and like different, like easy to access, not easy, but like easy to do once you remember to do it, ways to kind of care for your body and mind. What about really at the structural, like the foundational mental health level? What are some things what are some um, support systems that exist out there? What are places that you want people to know
Like,
about where they should seek out some support? Because I think that mental health support, especially from professionals, is so important. A lot of the times caregivers think, I'm really going to need the help when this person dies. Well,
right,
you're going to need the mental health support right now
right now,
too.
right? And I say COVID has actually opened up a lot of different venues that were not available earlier, even. So I'd say, like, look in our direct community, depending on, if it's Alzheimer's, the Alzheimer's Association. Go to them. There's a lot of caregiver support groups. If it's cancer diagnosis in your family, there's a lot of cancer support groups within hospitals. Online, there are a lot. Just Google support groups, caregiver support groups. They come up all over. Inspire has one, cancer.org has one. And then also look in your community. Dougy Center offers, peer support groups, both not just for kids and teens, but they're adult caregivers is what we, as well. Because we know if there are children in the family, both before and after a death, that it is important that caregivers get the support they need, because children do better if their caregivers are doing better.
Yeah.
So that is really the message, right? Caregivers, your jobs are so important. And whether your children are small or adult children, they're still always depending on you. So if you are a caregiver with a child, it really benefits everybody, not just yourself, but all of those other lives that you impact, to take care of yourself, to reach out for help, both in your direct community of family and friends, but also in those local organizations and national organizations online, for instance, that might be a support to you, to lean on other people.
Rebecca, thank you so much for, talking to me about this today. I think it's an incredibly integral thing for all of us to be talking about these days, that we are in, a loneliness epidemic. We're in a mental health crisis. We are still in a viral pandemic, and there is just so much caregiving going on in this country, in this world. And I'm so grateful to you for kind of helping me to unpack, what that actually looks like for people on a day-to-day basis, so that we can maybe have this conversation more out loud. And thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you.
And for everybody watching, just a reminder that both Rebecca and I are going to be hopping on to this later on. Please share your questions, share your experiences. You never know who you're going to meet in the comments section. And thank you so much for tuning in to Light After Loss this month with 1-800-Flowers. I'm Rebecca Soffer from Modern Loss, and a reminder that there are many, many, many other episodes of Light After Loss on 1-800-Flowers Facebook page that you can see. Just very low touch way to do that. Just they're probably right in front of your face right now. So thank you so much. And to all the caregivers out there, thank you so much for what you're doing. I'm sure that you never really, many of you didn't think that you would be signing up for such a thing, but life takes twists and turns. And so I really hope that you are taking care of yourselves in many different facets of your life, and take care.